What up, dude bros? I'm Frank. This is a brief intro to the new Nerf Hyper series. Hasbro sent me samples of the new Hyper blasters. This is an introduction to the Hyper series as a whole. I'll have standalone video reviews on each of these blasters. This video is a brief intro to the series as a whole, especially with these new balls. So what is Nerf Hyper? Hyper is a brand new series that's similar to Rival, but totally different and not compatible at all. This is a Nerf Rival round. This is a Nerf Hyper round. They are similar, but the Hyper rounds are much smaller than Rival rounds. Nerf Rival rounds are made of foam, whereas the Hyper rounds feel more like rubber. It's a squishy rubber. It's not a super dense rubber. Don't think like a bouncy ball. It's softer than that, but it's not as light and airy as a Rival rounds. It feels a little bit more dense. I weighed both of them, and the Hyper rounds come in at about 1.4 grams, whereas Rival rounds are about 1.9 grams. So the Rival rounds are heavier, but they're quite a bit bigger volume-wise. So the Hyper rounds are a bit more dense per unit of volume, if that makes sense. And they're rubber, so they're a little bit tacky, and they actually rub on each other a little bit more than Rival rounds and normal Nerf darts. It's not too big a deal, but when you're trying to load a hopper, they actually stick on the plastic and stick on each other, so it's a little bit more annoying than loading a Rival hopper. I've done my standard firing demo on all of these blasters, but I have not exhaustively tested this projectile yet. I'll firm up my opinion on Hyper in time, but I just need more lived experience with these blasters. So this is just an initial reaction video. A brief introduction to the blasters. Again, I'm reviewing all of these later. This is the Mach 100, a hopper-fed 100-round fully automatic blaster. It looks similar to the Percy's, it feels similar to the Percy's, but it has twice the ammo capacity. The next launch blaster is the Siege. This is a spring-powered hopper-fed blaster. The capacity is about 50, which is a really high-capacity spring blaster for this size. And lastly is the Rush, my personal favorite in this series. A spring-powered pistol with a capacity of 40 rounds. This is about the same size as a Chrono, which only holds 5 rounds. This holds 40. And if you can see, this will fit into a holster. I can see a lot of people purchasing this blaster. Continuing on to the next performance benchmark, Chronograph. The Rival par right now is about 90 to 100 FPS. I've chronoed all 3 of these blasters, and right now I'm getting an average between 100 and 115 feet per second, which is faster than Rival. But when the Ultra 1 came out, that shot like 75 FPS. It was not an accurate representation of what Ultra had to offer. So I can't be certain where this Chrono average is going to land. These could be running hot or a little slow compared to other Hyper blasters launching in the future. I don't know. To the next performance benchmark, trajectory or accuracy. I was a little surprised to see these not shooting very accurately. I found better performance and precision out of the Rival rounds in the Rival blasters. But here is some point of view range footage to show you the different blasters. First up, the new Nerf Hyper Mach 100. To compare to the Mach, here's the Percy's firing Rival rounds. And here's an Elite 2.0 turbine firing white Nerf Elite darts. And here's the same turbine firing Dart Zone Wafflehead darts. So what can we tell from this firing demo so far? Not a whole lot. The Mach blaster is really not that consistent. It kind of shotguns out the rounds, which is kind of funny, and it might be useful as like a full auto shotgun style blaster, but it is not as precise or as accurate as the Percy's. The Percy's, when you pull the trigger, for the most part, shoots a laser beam of balls. The Mach sprays them out in a less consistent pattern. So I'm not totally blown away with the accuracy and precision provided by the Hyper series. But I need more trigger time, I need more lived experience before I can formulate a really solid opinion on this new Hyper series. Right out of the gate, I did not like Ultra. I knew I wasn't gonna like Ultra. I formulated that opinion pretty quickly. But this, I feel like there's potential here. It's just not really being realized to its maximum. So that's my brief introduction to the new Nerf Hyper series. Not a whole lot of information here. I will have dedicated reviews on each of these 3 blasters. But getting to my personal opinion, this is just an initial reaction personal opinion. I'm a little hesitant. I'm not really on board with it quite yet. I see potential here because this is a 40-round holsterable pistol, which is pretty incredible. Because a 6 or 7 round pistol is a pretty high capacity pistol. 40 rounds? Like, wow. That could be a total game changer for sidearms. But I'm not totally sold on these little Hyper rounds. Stepping away from performance metrics and sort of the paper information, I have not really been enjoying using these little rounds. When a Nerf dart hits a wall, it generally hits and falls straight down. When a Rival round hits a wall, it hits and then bounces back and then rolls under your couch or goes somewhere. But the Hyper rounds hit a wall and ricochet with vigor, like with a tremendous amount of energy. And they're so small, they slide under doors, they slide under furniture. I've lost like half of the rounds that Hasbro sent me already. So honestly, the logistics of using these rounds is not as much fun as Rival. And when it comes to dart sweeps, it's a lot harder for me to see these little Hyper rounds. I do appreciate that they almost made them like fluorescent. They're really bright and shiny. So they do stick out a little bit. They're somewhat easy to see, but they're just very small. And a note to any outdoor nerfers, when you throw Hyper rounds into grass, they sink below the grass line. So your recovery rate of these things is going to be super, super low. I experienced that issue with Rival rounds and I got a little bit annoyed. Compared to Nerf Elite darts, which are so long, they sit on top of the grass. So you can see them, you can pick them up, and you can have a reasonable recovery rate. Rival's recovery outdoor, in my experience, is a little lower than Elite, and I don't think I'll be using Hyper rounds outside because I just won't recover any of them at all. They're just so small and dense that they'll sink below the grass line. You won't be able to see them. Enough of the negativity. So what does Hyper have to offer that's better than Rival? Number one, ammo capacity. They're much smaller rounds and they fire in a similar trajectory. They're not quite as consistent or accurate as the Rival rounds, but the Mach, for example, has about the same footprint. It actually has a much smaller hopper than the Percy's and it has twice the capacity. That's made possible because of the smaller rounds. Obviously, if it's smaller, you can put more of them in the same amount of volume. 100 of the Hyper rounds consumes a lot less space than 100 of the Rival rounds. And cosmetically, oh my gosh, these Hyper blasters look amazing. Fake carbon fiber burned in there with this awesome white, lime green, and blue. I love these colors, man. I'm a 90s kid, so it might just be me. This is kind of a throwback to an old color scheme. It's kind of retro. And they painted both sides of the blaster on all of these, so they didn't cheap out like some of their more recent builds. So cosmetically, man, this is right up my alley, and they have rails all over the place. Like, look at this. This is almost a joke. Rail, 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 rail. Like, what are you gonna put there? I don't even know. But Hasbro, thank you for putting a rail there. It looks awesome. So I like a lot of features in these new Hyper blasters. I'm still on the fence. I haven't really decided if I like them yet. I really dig Rival rounds. I prefer shooting Rival rounds over Nerf darts. I really dig Rival, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna switch out to Hyper. I don't know if it's worth it. At least when I'm referring to the primaries. The Rush is probably the most overpowered pistol that Nerf has ever made. A 40-round holsterable pistol. Like, oh my gosh, that's a god-tier sidearm. Who wouldn't want 40 rounds in their holster? That's incredible. So mixed opinion, lots to cover. Hopefully I gave you a brief introduction to the new Hyper series. Stay tuned for my dedicated video reviews on all three of these blasters coming soon. Please let me know in the comments section below, what do you guys think of Hyper? Would you want to use these outside in grass knowing you're gonna lose almost all of them? At what point is the ammo just too small and almost reminiscent of airsoft? Smaller can be better because it increases your capacity, but at what point is it just no longer Nerf? When I started shooting these, my initial reaction was, wow, I feel like I'm just shooting dart tips. You know when you put a Nerf Elite dart into an overpowered air gun and it actually blows the head right off? So then you're just launching a dart tip at someone? That's kind of what I thought was happening with the Hyper rounds. But it was just the tip. I don't know, I'm trying to be optimistic, but I think they were just overhyped, which is kind of a bummer given the name Hyper. It's definitely got potential, but it almost feels like a different hobby. Or just shooting like a water gun or Boomco darts. It's like not bad, it's just not really foam flinging. It's almost a different hobby. And these are little balls of rubber. So at what point are we just not shooting Nerf guns and just shooting a totally different projectile system, like airsoft or paintball? But I don't know, I'd like to see how they're received by you guys. This is just a brief, very scrambled introduction to Hyper. But that's it. So that concludes this video. Thanks so much for watching, bros, and as always, stay tactical.